Hello everyone and welcome back to Programming and Access 2013, the Advanced course. My name is Steve Bishop, and in today's video we're going to be talking about using the Runtime Edition of Access 2013. Now the Runtime Edition is a free but slimmed down version of Access that allows you to distribute a free version of Access along with your database. So people who don't have the full professional version of Microsoft Office installed on their computers will still be able to run your database. Now there are some drawbacks to doing this when you run in the Runtime Edition, and we're going to go over how to handle some of those pitfalls here in this video. But first, I just kind of want to tell you one of the positive side effects of the Runtime Edition is that because it is so slim and it's really designed only to run your application, that means users can't get in there and start tinkering with your database. They can't go in there and start changing the VBA code. They can't, open up the navigation pane and open up the tables and start fiddling around with the data and creating their own queries and stuff. They can't do any of that. All they can really do is just run the version of the database that you send them. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls. But before we can talk about those pitfalls, we need to set up an environment where we can test. So I've got a Hyper-V installation set up on my computer here, and I went ahead and installed on my Sandbox PC an instance of Windows 10 that has the Runtime 64-bit installed on it. And this is going to be my test environment where we're going to test my database in the Runtime Edition. Now, in order to get the Runtime Edition, you're going to need to open up a browser and use your favorite, search engine, either Google or Bing or whatever, and you're going to search for Microsoft Access 2013 Runtime. And make sure that the result that you select takes you to the Microsoft.com website where you can download this. You, of course, don't want to end up at any sort of malicious website that says that they're the Runtime Edition, but in fact are, trying to get you to install some sort of Trojan or something. So just make sure you're going to the Microsoft website in order to get the 2013 Runtime. And you can select the language that you want, which for me obviously is going to be English, and then you just click on the download button. From here you can select which architecture of runtime you want to run in, so either the 64-bit or the 32-bit. Now one good thing here about Access is that no matter what environment you did the development of your database in, chances are it will work under the other architecture. So since I developed my application in a 64-bit environment, chances are pretty good it is still going to run in the 32-bit environment. However, there are some minor differences, and there will be issues that you will need to handle. More specifically, if you go out there and do a search for PTR safe, that's a special keyword that's in the 64-bit version of the VBA code, but it is not in the 32-bit version, and that can cause some issues in your database. So just make sure that you are aware. And because of that, you really should be testing. If you think that your users might be running the 32-bit version of the runtime, you should probably go ahead and either get another virtual instance of a PC and install that 32-bit version, or you can just, of course, just uninstall the 64-bit after we get done testing it, and then try it out under the 32-bit version. Just run and install that one and try it out under there on the same box. But one way or the other, you really should be testing your database under all of the different environments you expect your users might be running it in. Now, I am in a very controlled environment, right? My system is a 64-bit operating system, and I did my development in Access 64-bit. My SQL Server is also 64-bit, and I don't really plan on distributing my application to anybody beyond myself. So really, the runtime 64-bit should be perfectly fine. So I'm going to select that, and then I would click on Next, and that would just, of course, just download the file. I would click on Run and do the installation. And after it gets done installing, then I'm going to have this A associated with all of my databases. This A icon, I should say. Now, one of the things that you'll discover when you do the installation of the runtime is that it doesn't give you any options about where to actually do the installation to. So I'll show you that the default location that Access gets installed is going to either be Program Files or Program Files x86, depending upon, of course, which operating system you're running, as well as which version of the runtime you downloaded. But for me, since I got the 64-bit version of an operating system and a 64-bit version of the runtime, it's just under Program Files, and then you'll find under the Microsoft Office folder, another folder called Office 15, and here we can see the installation of Access, and you can even see msaccess.exe right there. And if you did a side-by-side file comparison of all of the files that get installed with the Runtime Edition versus the Professional, you'll find that pretty much everything is identical. All these files are pretty much identical in their size and what they do. So there's really not much difference between the Professional version that you get with Microsoft Office Professional and the Runtime Edition. There are just some different things that are disabled in the Runtime Edition. Okay, so now that we know that, oops, I kind of wanted to keep that open because I need to go here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our first test. And of course, to test it, we're just going to go ahead and double click to open our database. So here we are running under the runtime environment, and the first thing that we get hit with is a security notice. Now don't worry, this has nothing to do with the fact that you're running in the runtime environment. What this is simply doing is telling your users, hey, look, we don't know who wrote this Northwind ACCDB database. You just want to make sure that the file comes from a trusted source. You know who wrote this, and everything is okay with this person and okay with this database. Otherwise, maybe you want an SSL certificate to verify the authenticity of the author. So you could get rid of this security notice by going out and getting a third-party SSL certificate and installing it in your database. Now that is beyond the scope of this video because really I'm targeting this series more towards the people who are just developing for their own, maybe office environment. But if you are looking to distribute your software application to the masses and maybe put it up on something like download.com, then you're going to need to go purchase an SSL certificate and install it, and that will get rid of this security notice because then you will be verified by a third party. But in our circumstances, in most people's circumstances when they're developing in Access, the people who you send this file to already know who you are, know what the purpose of the database is for, and they should just be able to click on Open. Now we're actually getting hit with an error. And this error says the command or action set displayed categories isn't available now. And yada, yada, yada. Use only those commands and macro actions that are currently available for this database. So there you go. Here is an error. This is our first error that's actually occurring because an action or command is not available in the Runtime Edition. And more specifically, that command or action is called set displayed categories. If the user clicks OK, they're going to get hit with this micro single step window here, or macro single step, I should say. And it's going to tell them that the macro name that tried to run is called Autoexec. The action name is set displayed categories, which we just saw in the previous window. And the arguments that are being passed are yes and Northwind traders. And then, of course, we have an error number here, 2046. Now, this is all fine and dandy. And you want your users, of course, to probably take a snapshot, some sort of desktop screen print of this error and send it to you. But once they do that and then they click on Stop All Macros, it's just going to take them out of the database. And that's not very handy because now your users can't really do anything. And when they open up the application, they go through, they're kind of forced to go through these prompts, and the only outcome of going through these prompts is to just close the database. So that's not very handy. We need to do something in our database to fix this error. So let me just open this back up again so we can get a good look at the error here. Let's go to this screen here that tells us the macro name is Autoexec, the action name is set displayed categories, and our arguments are yes, Northwind traders. So let me go ahead and go back into our development environment. And let's open up our database that we've been working in. And if you scroll down here, you'll find the macros here. And I haven't really gone over macros in this series. In either the basic series or this advanced series. And that's because I hate them. Okay, I really don't like macros. I understand that there's probably a need for them. It makes some of the functionality easier for the layman to use and do. But really, everything that you can do in macros, you can do in VBA code. And in fact, VBA gives you much more flexibility than macros do. I suppose really the only reason why you'd want to learn macros is if you plan on making your database a web database or a web application that gets set up on SharePoint. But since that is not a very typical environment and really not something I even recommend, I just don't even really find much use for macros since I can do everything in VBA. But there is something you need to know. If there is an Autoexec macro in your database, this will be the first thing that your database tries to run. So we do need to take a look at this and go into the design view and see what this macro is trying to do. And sure enough, the very first thing that it's trying to do is run this set displayed categories action. And you can see there are the parameters, yes, and category is equal to Northwind Traders. And that matches identically to the information we were given here on the error screen. So typically, well, let me just tell you, this set displayed categories, this function doesn't even work. I can't, it's supposed to go in here and make it so that this drop down for navigate to category is supposed to either turn on or off this option for Northwind Traders, but I've fiddled around with this and I can't get it to do anything. This action just doesn't do anything. So really you can just delete it. But let me tell you real quickly what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to go in here and do that thing on the navigation pane, right? It's supposed to go and do the Northwind Traders. But since it is supposed to do an action on the navigation pane, and over here in our runtime environment, there is no navigation pane, then that's what's causing the error. It's trying to perform some sort of action on a navigation pane that doesn't exist in the runtime. And that's something that we need to account for. So let me take you back. So let's go ahead and save this. And I don't know if you guys recall or not, but back in the basic series, there was a little blip in one of the videos that I did. I talked about you can go to the current database properties here, and you can set the display form to whatever form that you want. So I could do something like let's do the login dialog, right? That's the one that's supposed to happen. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Must close and reopen. Okay, I get that. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete this Autoexec macro because I hate macros. Okay, I just can't stand them. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and let's go ahead and exit out of our database. But now that login screen should still be the first thing that pops up. And sure enough, there we go. Okay, so that's all great. Now we've got our login dialog still popping up. Now, what about if we do want that set, well, let's say maybe it's not that set categories thing, but let's do something else. Let's make it so that the navigation pane goes away altogether. So here in my onload event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some code here. And again, this is going to occur right when the form opens, right? When the form loads. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do command navigate to, and you'll find that there is a category called AC navigation category object type. And the reason why we want to pick this is because this category pretty much exists universally on all databases that are open in Access Professional. So, or I should say in Access, the Office Professional version. So it's going to navigate to that, which is going to actually navigate the focus of Access to the navigation pane. And then we're going to do the do command, run command, AC CMD window hide. Okay, and that will actually hide the navigation pane when the form first loads. So let's go ahead and save that, debug and compile just to make sure I didn't fat finger anything. Let's go ahead and close this down. And now when I run this, we should get the navigation pane does not appear. You can see it is now hidden. Okay, so that may be a functionality that if the user is running in a professional version of Access, we want that to happen. We want the navigation pane to disappear. So, but what happens if we now try to run the same command? Because again, it's going to the navigation pane and minimizing it. What happens if we try to run this over here in our runtime environment? So let's delete that. Let me grab a fresh copy here. Now when we run our application, we get our security notice, which we expect, and contains a missing or broken reference to the file MS Outlook OLB version 9.5. So this is referring to a broken reference. There's a missing or broken reference, and if you look real carefully, if you squint real hard, you can probably make out that MSOUTL is the Microsoft Outlook library. So there's a problem with our references. And once again, we get hit with a new error window here that says execution of this application is stopped due to a runtime error. And it just shuts down our application when the user clicks OK. So that's not pretty cool. You know, that's really not something that's handy. Our users are just basically getting kicked out of the application whenever there's some sort of runtime error. So once again, now we have two errors that we need to handle. Okay, so let's go back into our development version and let's see what we can do here. First, let's take a look at what's going on behind the scenes here of our login dialog. Let's go into Design View, on Load, and there was a broken reference. Now, if I go up to Tools and References, there's no broken reference, right? Everything looks fine here. But you have to understand that the environment that's over here that my Runtime Edition is running in does not have Microsoft Office installed because I did not get Office at all on this computer. And that very well might be a scenario that your users might have. Maybe you're sending your application to somebody that doesn't have Office installed at all. And boy, it is taking a long time to pull up that start menu. But anyway, I don't have Office installed on this system, and so therefore I don't have this Outlook library. So what do I do about that? And what do I do about this navigation command? Well, the first thing that you need to do is, I actually need to go back to this window here. I need to go ahead and unassociate this reference, okay? And this is really, I've talked about it, I've touched on this a few times, the early binding versus late binding. Early binding means that you select a reference here. Late binding means that you actually code it into the code to go and instantiate an object from some other outside library. So that's what we're going to have to do here with this Outlook item here, these two Outlook items that I've created here. We need to actually create those on the fly with late binding. So instead of new Outlook application, what I need to do instead is set OApp equal to create object Outlook application. And this is not going to be a new Outlook application. This is just going to be an object. And then we're going to set, oh, that's actually right already. Just separate that out to make it a little clearer. And this is also going to be an object. So now I'm going to create an object of Outlook.application, and then I'm going to use that OApp application to create an item that is an OL mail item. Now, one other thing is this OL mail item comes from that same library, and it turns out that this is an enum, this is enumerable, and the value of OL mail item is actually 0. So I can just substitute that enum for the actual value of 0, and we're going to create an email object. Okay, so now I've got my late binding going on here. So let's go ahead and save that. But I still haven't really solved everything, but I kind of want to show you here what's going to happen when this errors out here. So let's go ahead and save this once again, and we'll go back and delete this version and grab a copy of the latest one. And now when we run it, I'm going to get that security notice. And once again, we just get this execution of the application is stopped due to a runtime error. So I just wanted to show you there is still an error going on here, okay? Even though we changed it to late binding, we got rid of the broken reference, we still have this runtime error happening. And we're really not getting any information about what the problem is. And this is why you really need to pay attention to make small changes, then go test, then make more small changes and go test. But we know that we're in the right vicinity because the behavior is definitely changing on our errors. So let's go ahead and go back into our database here. And the issue goes back to, once again, the very first line of code that's trying to run here. That's this navigate to and run command window hide. That's because we're trying to navigate to a window that does not exist in the runtime environment. So what can we do then to check and see if we are running in the full version of Access or the runtime version of Access? Well, luckily for us, there's actually a way to find this out. So what I'm going to do, if syscommand, and in syscommand, you do AC syscommand runtime. And that will actually tell you a true or false as to whether or not you are running the runtime version of Access. So I can go ahead and end if here. And actually, let's go ahead and surround this whole thing. So I'm going to cut this. There we go. Because clearly if they're running in the runtime edition, chances are they may not have Outlook. They might. Maybe you could do some other check to see whether or not Outlook is on here. But one way or the other, here we go. We're going to check and see if they're running in the runtime. And actually, we want this to be not. There we go. Just fix that code up. Okay, so our command, our navigate to, and our run command, as well as the object setting and creating, will only happen if we are not running in the runtime. So let's go ahead and save that. Close it. And let's just make sure that this still behaves the way that we want it to when we are not in the runtime environment. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in my development environment. And sure enough, there's the Outlook icon. So it created the mail item just fine. And we don't have the navigation pane. So the full version of Access is behaving exactly as we would want it. The code that I wrote is working just fine. Now when we try to go over here, oops, I forgot to copy it, didn't I? Yes, I forgot to copy it. Let me go back here, delete that, get a copy of our latest version. All right, open it. No errors. There we go. Our login screen works just fine. Now, obviously, I don't have the Outlook icon because I don't have Outlook installed, and everything is working exactly as it should. So there you go. That's just one of the things that you can do, or that's probably the main thing that you're going to want to do with all of your code that you might be running in the runtime environment, is to just do that that little check to make sure you're not running in the runtime environment if you're going to be doing a command that only works within the full Office Professional version. So anyway, there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned something from it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe.